Donkey Kong is a video game character as old as time itself, as well as one of the most beloved, so much so that cavemen invented gorillas in his honor. Most people are very aware of his success. Even those who don't engage with video games all that much will be able to pick out Donkey Kong from a lineup of notorious kidnappers of women. But even though he was created in 1981 when time began, I personally feel like he didn't come into his own until the Donkey Kong Country series. Up until then, he was always the bad guy. You didn't even get to play as him. But Donkey Kong Country was a whole new incarnation of the donkey. I was introduced to the series with Returns, but I have gone back and played the first 3 games made by Rare, and they're fucking awesome. Especially the second one. They're so simple, yet so amazing. They never fail to impress. Well, the third one did a little bit, but even when the Donkey Kong Country series is at its worst, it's still really good. Despite that though, Rare didn't go on to make a Donkey Kong Country 4. Their next Donkey Kong game would instead be Donkey Kong 64, a 3D platforming adventure jumping on the trend that was all the rage at the time. At this point they already had Banjo-Kazooie under their belt, so why not have another go at a 3D game with Donkey Kong instead? How would that turn out? Well, it turns out that Donkey Kong 64 is a wonderful game. Is what I would say if I was stupid! As much as I wish it wasn't true, Donkey Kong 64 is rubbish. There are so many things wrong with it that I don't even know where to start. So I guess I'll start with the start. The game opens with, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the DK rap. Whether this rap is deliberately cheesy and ironic to make you laugh, or a genuine attempt at being cool to make you excited, I can't tell. But what I can tell is that it introduces you to the DK crew. But as catchy as the song is, I don't want to dwell on it. We'll get very well acquainted with the DK crew later. The game actually opens with a cutscene in which King K. Rool and the Kremlings attempt to park their island in front of Donkey Kong's island for about 3.5 minutes. Shortly afterwards, Donkey Kong is told by Squawks the parrot that his entire hoard of golden bananas has been stolen, and all the other Kongs have been captured. Donkey Kong somehow didn't notice, and now has to set out to recover the golden bananas, rescue his Kong companions, and stop K. Rool from destroying Donkey Kong Island with his giant laser that broke when the Kremlings crashed into a rock. To prepare himself for the journey ahead, Donkey Kong heads to Cranky's lab and undergoes some quick training before heading out into the vast DK Isles to save the day. Clearly, this is a very different game to what I've gotten used to with Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country was a linear side-scrolling platformer, whereas Donkey Kong 64 is a 3D Collect-a-thon platformer. And I think the best way to explain how this all works is by talking about the first proper level, Jungle Japes. As Donkey Kong, you explore these open areas looking for collectibles. These include bananas, coins, crowns, blueprints, banana fairies, golden bananas, and boss keys. The main ones you need to be worried about are the golden bananas and boss keys, as they grant access to new levels. These collectibles are scattered across the level, some hidden behind certain objectives and challenges. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And it is, but once you get into the groove of it all, it doesn't seem quite so daunting. Before too long you'll be picking up collectibles like a champ. But along the way you'll notice areas you can't access, like doors you can't open, for example. And that's where this game's main, well, let's call it a gimmick for now, comes into play. One of the things Donkey Kong has to do in this level is rescue Diddy Kong. This is done by opening his cell using Donkey Kong's coconut gun that he buys from Funky Kong's armory for a few coins. Once this is done and Diddy is freed, you now have the option to play as him. With Diddy, you can access areas that Donkey Kong isn't able to, and help out in rounding up all the collectibles. Except that's not quite how it works. Diddy doesn't help out Donkey Kong with his bananas and coins and such. Instead, Diddy has his own set of collectibles that only he can collect. Donkey Kong can only collect yellow collectibles and has golden bananas specific to him, and Diddy has his own set of red collectibles as well as more golden bananas specific to him. The two can use their abilities to help each other out, but at the end of the day, they can only pick up collectibles and complete objectives that are specific to them. It was an odd choice, I felt, but I pushed through, collecting all of the items for both characters, and pushed on to the next level. And it is in the next level where I started to lose my shit. The second level is called Angry Aztec, and the Aztec isn't the only thing that got pissed off during this level. I spent nearly 3 hours here, and during those 3 hours, it dawned on me what exactly I'd gotten myself into. Starting off with Donkey and Diddy, I made my way through picking up what collectibles I could, and during that process, I ended up rescuing 2 new Kongs, Lanky Kong and Tiny Kong. And it was while I was playing as them when I realized that Donkey Kong 64 goes way too far. This game is ridiculous. I already thought it was strange that Donkey and Diddy had their own sets of collectibles that only they could collect. I already thought it was irritating that I had to frequently swap characters because I found something that only the other character could do. I already thought it was mildly annoying having to deal with all of that in the first level, Jungle Japes. But now in Angry Aztec, that whole situation has doubled in magnitude because now I've got 2 new Kongs. Lanky Kong has his own set of blue collectibles that only he can collect, and Tiny Kong has her own set of purple collectibles that only she can collect. On top of that, each character has their own upgrades, weapons, and instruments they have to buy from Cranky, Funky, and Candy respectively, using their own coloured coins that only they can pick up. And across the level, you will find things where you need the ability of a specific Kong, or the weapon of a specific Kong, or the instrument of a specific Kong. You explore the level, looking for things to do and collect, only to realize you don't have the right Kong for it, so you have to go back to the nearest tag barrel to swap Kongs and return to where you were. And that happens so often. Half of the time you spend playing the game is dead time spent going back to tag barrels to swap characters because the Kong you need at any given moment will never be the Kong you're playing as, and it's unbelievably tedious. If some areas were dedicated to specific Kongs, it wouldn't nearly be so bad. But they aren't. Every area is littered with collectibles and tasks for every Kong. So you're constantly swapping out Kongs to pick things up and activate things, only to need a different Kong immediately afterwards. It's outrageous. The levels do have warp pads, which does make the repeated journeys back to tag barrels slightly more bearable, but they don't negate the problem. If anything, their presence shows that the developers knew just how ridiculous it was and tried to slap a band-aid on it to make it seem less bad. And you know what hurts the most? This was only level 2, and it was already this bad. I hadn't even rescued the 5th Kong yet. Chunky Kong has his own set of green collectibles that only he can collect, as well as his own upgrades, weapons, and instruments that are needed at various points in each level. It gets even worse. The only way you can play this game without wanting to jump into oncoming traffic is to know where everything is and how everything works beforehand, so that you don't have to waste time figuring out which Kongs you need and where and when you need them. But obviously, as I'm playing this blind, I don't have that information, so I have to painstakingly figure it all out as I go around. It's dreadful. I would say that they all play well, but honestly, I can't be certain, because I'm never the same Kong for more than 3 minutes at a time, so I don't really get a good feel for them. I just know they have stupid powers like shrinking and turning invisible and inflating themselves, and most of these abilities get swallowed up in the flood of other nonsense the game tries to drown you in, making them that much less likely to shine. Any good game of this genre would have all the collectibles in the level be rewards for simple and fun objectives. There's the collectible, all you have to do is go and get it. But this game mangles that idea into a nightmare. Instead of just going to get it and completing whatever challenge is involved, you need to endure ridiculously long sequences of events that involve constantly swapping out Kongs to affect the level in some way before swapping to another Kong to actually complete an objective and make some actual progress. So much of this game is tedious and convoluted, seemingly designed that way just to deliberately piss you off. Look at this gate in Fungi Forest. It's clear that you need Tiny and her feather crossbow to shoot the switches to open it. So you do that, the gate opens, and you head in. But immediately there's another gate where you need Chunky's pineapple launcher, so you have to go back to the nearest tag barrel and swap to Chunky to open that gate. But once you open that gate, you're greeted by a trail of purple bananas. Purple bananas! The ones that only Tiny can collect! So what was the point of that? Why was that Chunky gate there? Was it just to make you have to go back and switch characters? What other purpose does that gate serve if the bananas on either side of it are only for Tiny? Do you see what I mean? The game is deliberately being tedious and convoluted for no good reason. And this shit is consistent and frequent all over the game. Every corner of every level is like this. It all goes out of its way to make the gameplay experience as annoying as possible. While other games would have you go from A to B simply by taking the lift, Donkey Kong 64 instead opts for taking the stairs, cramming in as many unnecessary steps as is humanly possible. Even simply navigating the levels can be an absolute chore, especially when you also factor in how the levels are full of dead ends as well as the dodgy camera. With its focus on the extreme amount of backtracking and the constant swapping of Kongs to even try to get anything done, it really is painful. And speaking of, where are Dixie and Kitty? Why are they not here? What can Tiny and Chunky do that Dixie and Kitty can't? Besides being in a shit game. Although, to be fair, I wouldn't wish such an awful fate upon them, especially Dixie. She doesn't deserve to suffer through this hellhole of a game. The way the game is structured and organised actively discouraged me from trying to collect everything. It's bloated with so much crap, and everything is stupidly overcomplicated. Having 5 separate playable characters with 100 bananas and 5 golden bananas each per level that only they can collect is absolutely insane and goes way too far. Not helped by the fact that you have to constantly switch between those characters to even make a dent in collecting them. You can't even buy upgrades, weapons and instruments or cash in blueprints on behalf of the other Kongs. You have to switch characters for that too. I feel like I spent more time looking for tag barrels than I did looking for collectibles. You can spend hours upon hours in any given level and barely make any progress in collecting everything. The pace of the game and the pace of progress is unbelievably slow. You can get tips from Wrinkly Kong, who is now dead, probably because she killed herself when she found out she was going to be in this game, but that can only help you so much. For most of it, you're on your own. Much like Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64 is going out of its way to make fully completing the game as infuriating and unnecessarily tedious as possible. With Banjo-Tooie, I was committed to trying to get all the collectibles, which ultimately led me to quitting the game early because I simply couldn't be asked to put up with its bullshit anymore. This time, I've decided not to fall into the same trap. This time, I'm going to do what I assume the game actually wants me to do. I'm simply not going to try. I'm not. I'm just going to do the absolute bare minimum, which through a quick search, I've discovered is all the boss keys along with 100 golden bananas. That's all I'm going to bother doing. Let's see if this bare minimum approach makes this any less of a shit show. Actually collecting the golden bananas involves quite a lot. There are many different challenges you'll be faced with. These range from shooting things with melons to swatting flies to barrel launching to minecart rides to races to shooting things with melons to swatting flies to barrel launching to minecart rides to races to shooting things with melons. There's a lot of recycling if you couldn't tell. Most of the golden bananas you find within the levels themselves are unique, involving some kind of puzzle or platforming challenge, and those are the ones I actually do like. They make you think, they get you engaged, they get the cogs in your brain turning, and even though they almost certainly require you to switch characters at least once, they still offer up some interesting gameplay. But when a special golden banana barrel pops up, you know it's going to be some kind of shitty minigame, one you've likely already played before. They're not great, but they're also not complete disasters. I mean, what? Would I rather spend another half an hour swapping characters for no reason? Hell no. And also, I would be lying if I said I didn't join in saying Dong, Dong, Donkey Kong every time I picked up a golden banana, so that's a bit of a silver lining to this golden bullshit. But what I learned through my playthrough is that my approach of not trying doesn't exactly work. To unlock new levels you need boss keys, but to get to the bosses you need enough bananas to unlock the door. Sometimes this is a huge amount, as many as 400. That's 80 bananas per character, 80% of the bananas in that level. Now to be fair, the bosses are quite fun a lot of the time, definitely the best gameplay you'll find in the whole game. But are they worth scouring each level top to bottom with every Kong just to have enough bananas to fight them in the first place? I don't think so. You also need enough golden bananas to get past the signs that block level entrances. Without enough golden bananas, your boss key is going to mean fuck all, and you'll be stuck and unable to go any further unless you go back and collect more golden bananas. What this means is that even if you don't want to try and explore every corner of every level with every character, and instead want to just get to the end of the game, it doesn't matter. You don't really have a choice, because you need to do a pretty hefty chunk of it to even be allowed to get further into the game. So even as I was not trying, I ended up spending hours on each level anyway, just so I could get the boss keys and enough golden bananas to even unlock the next level to start with. There is no way to just rush through the game and get it done. It forces you to constantly switch characters to pick up their bananas so you can unlock the boss and get the boss key. It forces you to interact with convoluted level design and structure involving a variety of Kongs to get golden bananas so that you have enough to get past the signs. It forces you into its bullshit in a way that makes me loathe it even more. You can either put up with the game's blatantly flawed nature and tedious design, or give up. It feels like there's no way out besides the sweet release of death. What I do appreciate is that it doesn't go as far as Banjo-Tooie, where things from certain levels could affect things in completely different unrelated levels, making your progress even slower than it was already. Donkey Kong 64's levels are self-contained and have no impact on other levels, and thank God for that. Could you imagine if the deliberately tedious character switching focus of this game was combined with interconnected levels that can affect each other? That truly would be hell in video game form. But with that realization, I'm starting to think that maybe Banjo-Kazooie was good by complete accident, because looking at Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo-Tooie, and now this, it's becoming increasingly obvious that they had no idea what they were doing when it came to this genre of 3D platformer. I don't know who at Rare was holding the whip, but it's clear their game design philosophy had changed at some point. They must have thought, gamers don't want good stuff, they want more stuff. And hey, if the more stuff was also good stuff, I probably wouldn't complain. But it's not good stuff. It's all rubbish. At no point in the game did I ever think, that was a cool bit of level design, that was a fun minigame, I like having to switch my character every 10 seconds and navigating the same areas multiple times over with them. All I ever thought was, when does it fucking end? Everything is such a chore. I honestly regret my choice to play this game to the end. It's just wasting precious time. The presentation does help it, the game looks nice with some great music, but at the same time, it doesn't feel at all like Donkey Kong. It feels more like Donkey Kong characters were plonked into a Banjo-Kazooie game. I get that it's made by the same people, but the similarities are uncanny. The untrained eye and ear probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Apart from the characters and a few melodies from Donkey Kong Country, it doesn't look or sound anything like Donkey Kong. I do like it, I did hum along to a lot of the music as my sanity slowly started slipping through my fingers, but they could have made a bit more of an effort to make it feel like it belongs in the Donkey Kong world. A few familiar riffs didn't really cut it. I did still enjoy the presentation though. Despite all my grievances and a complaint from the neighbours who said that I, and I quote, was screaming like an elephant giving birth into a megaphone, I soldiered on all the way towards the end. The final level in the game is called Hideout Helm, and contrary to most levels in the game, I actually kind of enjoyed playing it. This was mainly because it had no collectibles. No bananas, no coins, no blueprints, no golden bananas, just some easy to collect banana medals and the final boss key right at the end. And it was kind of a fun level. It had a countdown, the length of which was determined by how many blueprints you had turned into Snide. I ended up with 36 minutes, and before the time runs out, you need to complete a variety of platforming and combat challenges to disable K. Rool's laser. Of course, this still involved the constant switching of characters, nothing highlighting that better than needing to use Chunky to demolish most of the doors defending the challenges, only to then be forced to go back and swap to the character you need for those challenges. But it wasn't that bad. It was a straightforward level, it wasn't bloated with crap, I was happy with it. I started to think, maybe I've been too harsh on this game. After all, I was getting to see the capabilities of all the Kongs without the endless tedious distractions. Donkey and Chunky focus on strength, Diddy and Tiny focus on mobility, Lanky focuses on his inflation fetish. If the whole game was like this, it might not have been so bad. Has this game been good all along? But then, as I approached the room with the boss key, my progress was halted. I couldn't get through this door, and I quickly learned that I needed 2 more collectibles. I needed the Rareware coin from getting enough points in this Jetpack arcade game, and I needed to get the Nintendo coin from beating the Donkey Kong 1981 arcade game. The level waited until right at the end to remind me of just how bullshit this game is. No one told me that those arcade games had rewards that were required to beat the game. I thought they were just neat little Easter eggs, little bonus minigames that had no bearing on the game itself. But nope, of course they're a part of it all. It wouldn't be Donkey Kong 64 if they didn't go and overcomplicate everything. I had to leave Hideout Helm and go and beat them. one of which was in the middle of a completely unrelated level, and I had to beat that one twice because the first time it rewarded me with "Ooh, banana!" Just as I was starting to calm down and see something resembling value in this game, it had to go and piss me off again. Not everything has to be restricted and blocked off by certain requirements. Sometimes it's better to just let me walk through the door instead of installing 400,000 locks on it. Did the developers not realize that players like it when they feel like they're making progress instead of being locked out of places because they haven't endured enough bullshit yet? Did they not realize that having progression drag on at an incredibly slow pace makes the game less fun to play? What's so hard to understand about that? I put my frustration aside and collected those coins. I picked up the final boss key and used it to take on King K. Rool in a boxing match that was, admittedly, really fun. It was a fight that had a lot of personality, it brought all the Kongs together and made use of their collective powers, and I was hit with a wave of relief when, after such a long, drawn-out, torturous experience, it was finally over. Was the final boss worth the pain it took to get there? No, but at least the game ended on a high, which I suppose is fitting because you probably need to be high to enjoy the rest of it. I completed the game with a crisp 59% completion. Even after all of that, I barely managed to scrape through half of the game. I can't even begin to imagine how painful going for 100% would be. Having to go through all those levels and deal with switching Kongs every other second, to deal with some bullshit minigame or some stupid arrangement of coloured bananas, or some convoluted sequence of Kong-specific powers and switches that makes simply traversing the level outrageously infuriating. It just melts my brain thinking about it. In short, fuck this game. If it took it easy on the collectibles, or if it let all 5 Kongs share the collectibles in a single pool rather than splitting them up, or if it just let you switch characters on the go, cutting out all the backtracking and looking for tag barrels, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. Maybe it would have been tolerable. But unfortunately, it's not. I'm sure some people love this game, and you know what? Good for them. I'm glad they were able to get something out of this game. But for me, this was a massive disappointment. Rare was on a winning streak with the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, so it's a shame they had to go and undo all of that excellence by shitting out a game like this. Donkey Kong 64 is rubbish. And I think there's only one way I can properly send it off. Here we go! So I'm finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap as I take you through this monkey crap. DK 64, he's the leader of the bunch. You know him well. He's finally back to adventure through hell. He plays nothing like how he did before. I can't bring myself to look at him anymore. He's bigger, slower, and weaker too. And sadly not the only member of the DK crew. DK 64. DK 64 is shit. She's not Dixie Kong, and that's fucking lame. She can shrink in size. Unlike this game, it's really not a cool power at all. She's got nothing good, as far as I can recall. She can spin her hair to fly through the sky, and worst of all, she makes me want to die. DK 64. He has no style, he has no grace. So why put him here in the first place? He has really long arms, ideal for a fisting, where he can touch your organs that I won't bother listing. His inflation fetish is awkward and gross. He's the new Kong that I despise the most. DK 64. DK 64 is shit. Diddy is back, this time with allegations, the ones we've all heard across all of our nations. His best days are behind him, that's clearly a fact. Playing this game feels like I'm being attacked. He flies around like a bee on the piss. I'll destroy this game so that I might find bliss. DK 64. Finally, He's here for you. It's another pointless add-on to the DK crew. He gets bigger and bigger, like the game he's in. The game that's way too big to even chuck in the bin. He can vanish from sight and nobody knows why. I'd get the same result if I just stabbed my eye. He's one of many failures in this shithole game, one that's bloated with crap for which Rare is to blame. DK 64. DK 64. DK 64. DK 64. DK 64.